Okay, I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt Show, Jen Hemphill. She helps women transform their finances from being totally overwhelming to making it really normal and simple and giving people confidence in handling their money. You know, Jen, it's funny, as I'm making the introduction, I'm talking about you helping women. Do you not help men at all?
Well, it's not that I don't help men. It really, the reflection of how I help women, it really transcends into the men, because in a relationship, when the woman is more confident, when the woman feels motivated and inspired to take action with the money, she is naturally going to make better decisions. The relationship is naturally going to be more at ease because she's more confident. So, of course, when I do one-on-one coaching, if there's a spouse involved, of course, they're going to be on the call. But my focus is just women, just because I know how to talk to women about money.
Help me out a little bit. Maybe this is not for the general audience, but, like you, I deal with people all the time. I do financial planning, and very often, even today, in today's modern world, the men seem to take charge, not 100% of the time, but I would certainly say the majority of the time. And I always say to them, make sure your wife gets involved. The two of you should be doing this stuff together, certainly the big picture stuff. What do you tell people in order to make them realize how important that is?
Right. And I can't agree more. I say the same thing. I pretty much say exactly the same thing. Even if you don't do anything with the money and you're not in charge with the main bill paying, you need to be in the know. So I just communicate why you need to be in the know. Things can happen. Your life can change. Maybe the death of a spouse. Then what happens, right? If you haven't been managing the money, you have to be able to pick up and go. Or maybe there's a divorce involved, or things like that where life changes. You just have to be able to pick up and go and just be prepared. So I communicate it in those ways where it's just important when life changes, because life happens, and also for just the day-to-day where you're just going to be more confident and make those decisions, which makes the relationship just a whole lot easier.
Mm-hmm. But dealing with money in a relationship, well, frankly, for a lot of people, it's a huge stress factor. Why is that?
Because money is emotional, and we all grew up differently around money. So therefore, we treat our money and how we manage our money is different. We have a different emotional attachment, if you will, depending on how we grew up, whether we grew up around, I know I grew up around hearing a lot of, we can't afford this all the time. So that later on affected me in becoming a big saver, which is a good thing, right? Saving is a good thing. But at the same time, I became what I called a hoarder of money, meaning I saved and saved, but I was afraid to spend that money just because I didn't want to have a lack of money. So you just have to really be in tune of how you grew up around money to know why you're treating the money the way you're doing, or how you're managing the money now.
So obviously when two people come together in a relationship, each one is going to have a different background, different experience, different fears about money. What's a good way, do you think, for people to really come together so that they can deal with it together?
Right. And that's a great question. You don't want to just, when we have money conversations with our spouse, especially if it's stressful, we don't want to talk directly about the money, or, oh, you spent this on that, or why did you do this with this money? You don't want to start out that way, because that will definitely go around the wrong path. But instead, you want to take the path of just a more calm setting where you don't talk directly about money. Rather, you start with getting to know each other better. Even though, let's say you've been married for a long time, do you feel that you know your spouse, which you do to an extent, but have you observed and listened to how they grew up around money? And if you have, that's great, because you are more in tune to why they are the way they are. So that's really important in getting, having a conversation of, oh, so tell me about, maybe if you've been married for a long time, that might be an awkward conversation just because you're supposed to know your spouse, but you have to really ask some good questions to get to know them on that level. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think asking questions instead of telling instead of being the only one talking. In fact, Jen, as we started, I was the only one talking, and I introduced you, and I didn't mention that you are also the host of Her Money Matters podcast, which is a show actually designed for women to learn about dealing with money. Just to back up a little bit, we've been talking so far about why it's important for women to be involved in money, and why it's also important for spouses to work together in handling the money. We're talking with Jen Hemphill, and she works with women mostly, I guess, helping to empower them to deal with a lot of financial issues. The problem, I think, Jen, is that a lot of people come from homes or backgrounds with really, really bad money habits. How can they change them?
There's different ways. Just basically taking a step back and giving yourself the permission that you're not going to transform yourself overnight, that this is a journey. It's a rinse and repeat process. And just give yourself the permission to just take baby steps and just celebrate those baby steps, those accomplishments, no matter how small, along the way. That's basically, especially if it's been a tough life. I mean, that's how I would do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, give me an example. Let's say that you're coaching someone who clearly suffers from overspending. That's a common one that I say. People spend more than they really should. How are you going to? What baby steps would you suggest she takes in order to stop that habit?
Sure. Well, first we would assess why that there's a lot of spending going on, right? And really in true numbers, what that looks like, because we have to be clear about those numbers. And then you also want to know the cash flow. So the money that's coming in and the money going out. And with spenders and like those that are quote unquote impulse spenders, I do believe that you have to put some money aside for that, because that's what's going to throw your budget, if you will, off. So you want to start planning for that. And even if it's just putting some money aside, let's say...
Sorry, so it's like you're saying like an emergency fund for retail therapy when you got to go buy that pair of boots?
Yeah, I say a blow-off fund or a splurge fund or whatever you want to call it. Be creative about it. So I always teach, put some money aside. Of course, you have to look at what's coming in, what's going out, and really assess what your habits are as far as overspending. What does that look like money-wise with a number? And putting some money aside, because that's going to help, because it's that when you overspend and it's not in your plan, it throws everything off, which therefore a lot of stress comes into play. So it's always just putting some money aside. And again, it's a rinse and repeat process. It's not a perfect process. But once you start putting that money aside, clearly, let's say you have $50 or $100, whatever it is, and therefore that you're not going to be guilty of spending that $50, that $100, whatever it is, because you have that in there for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. So it's planning ahead even for short-term needs or wants, as opposed to what I talk to people a lot is retirement planning and plan for the long term. And you're saying, yeah, but it might be that on the weekend you're going to go shopping and you're going to want to spend money. Don't let it ruin you financially. Put aside the money so you'll know that there's X number of dollars available to you. And also that'll help to kind of alleviate the guilt, which in fact leads me to my next question. Guilt is often tied with money. People, whether it's because your parents, well, let's forget the psychology for now. Let's talk about another case, which I also see. And again, I think I'm a little surprised I see this, given that we live in 2016 now. But a lot of times you have stay-at-home moms and the husband is out working, and the women feel guilty that they're not participating in the financial, in the income for the house. How do you deal with that?
Yes, that is a great question, because it does happen. But really, even if they might not partake in the income, they're partaking in the money in a sense, just because they are out doing the grocery shopping, they are taking care of family. So that is a huge thing. Maybe that they're not bringing in income, but they can partake in how to manage the money better and how to save better, how to achieve those financial goals. So they can partake in that way. And there should be no guilt because you're taking care of family. You're being paid, just not money. You're being, I shouldn't say you're being paid, but you do have a job. It's just a more fulfilling job, and maybe an income is not coming in, but you definitely have an important job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the way that I often try to explain it, maybe you can tell me if this is a good way to do it, is I say, look at your family like a company. In a company, they're the salesmen. They're the only people who are bringing money into the company. But it doesn't mean that you don't have managers and secretaries and janitors and the president and people doing all sorts of other jobs, from accounting to legal work, to maintain that whole structure. And even though there's one guy out there selling and bringing in money and he thinks he's really, a hotshot, without everyone else involved, there simply is no company, or in this case, no family. Absolutely.
It's definitely a team effort. I agree, and I love that analogy.
All right, well, you can use it on Her Money Matters podcast. Jen, I see we're just about out of time, but in the last few seconds, just tell us, how can people learn more about you and follow the work that you're doing?
Sure, they can just go simply to jenhemphill.com, and I do have a free community that you can join, and that is at jenhemphill.com/community.
All right, so we will put links to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Jen, thanks so much for joining me.
I appreciate you having me. This was fun.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.